27,000 feet above Berlin, the air was thin enough to see forever. September 19, 1942. Oberleutnant Wilhelm Johnen's gloved fingers gripped the throttle of his Messerschmitt Bf 109 G2, and what he saw through his gun sight made no sense at all. The British aircraft ahead was pulling away from him, not slowly, not gradually, just leaving. His fighter was the latest variant the Luftwaffe could field. The DB-605A engine hammering out 1,475 horsepower. Manifold pressure kissing the red line. Engine temperature climbing into territory that made mechanics nervous. And still, the gap widened. Johnen keyed his radio. "He's pulling away," he told his wingman. The words tasted wrong in his mouth. The British bomber had no gun turrets, no defensive armament he could see through the crystal-clear September sky. Just a sleek wooden fuselage painted reconnaissance blue. Twin engines that seemed to hum with a confidence that bordered on insult. The pilot was Flight Lieutenant D.A. George Perry, flying de Havilland Mosquito W4051 on only its fourth operational sortie over Germany. Perry didn't know it yet, but he was carrying the opening round of a 6-year humiliation, one that would expose every crack in German fighter design and prove that sometimes the greatest weapon isn't armor or firepower. Sometimes it's just speed so absolute your enemy can't even touch you. The humiliation didn't start with combat. It started with intelligence reports that read like bad fiction. Early 1941, Abwehr agents in neutral Sweden transmitted specifications for a new British bomber under development. The details seemed absurd. A bomber built primarily from wood. Laminated birch plywood bonded with Ecuadorian balsa and Canadian spruce. No defensive armament whatsoever. No gun turrets. Just 2 crew members betting their lives on speed alone. Estimated top speed over 400 miles per hour at altitude. The Reichsluftfahrt Ministerium's technical assessment, filed in March 1941, dismissed the whole thing. Hermann Friedrich Lang, an aeronautical engineer assigned to evaluate foreign aircraft development, wrote in his report that the British claims were either deliberate misinformation or reflected desperate resource constraints forcing them to build bombers from wood. This aircraft, if it even existed, represented economic weakness, not technical innovation. You could understand why they thought that. Germany had pioneered modern bomber design with aircraft like the Heinkel He-111 and Dornier Do S-17. These were proper military machines with defensive armament and armor protection. The idea that Britain would regress to wooden construction seemed to confirm everything Nazi propaganda said about British industrial decline. The Mosquito became a punchline before anyone had actually seen one. Pilots called it the Holz bomber, the wooden bomber, said with derision. Some called it Englischer Möbel, English furniture. The mockery lasted exactly until the first attempted interception. When George Perry flew that September morning over Berlin, he was proving what German intelligence had laughed off. His route took him across the North Sea, then south toward the capital at 27,000 feet. An altitude where the air was thin enough to challenge German fighters but perfect for the Merlin 21 engines with their 2-stage superchargers. Berlin's radar network picked up the intruder at 08:47 hours. Single contact moving at impossible speed. Fighter controllers scrambled 12 Bf 109Gs from Jagdgeschwader 27, climbing hard to intercept. Wilhelm Johnen led the first schwarm to make contact. He spotted the Mosquito at 6 miles and pushed his throttle to maximum continuous power. The Gustav variant was Germany's most advanced fighter, capable of 406 miles per hour at optimal altitude. Johnen had flown combat missions since 1940. Survived the Battle of Britain. Accumulated 23 victories. He understood interception geometry better than most men understood their own families. None of that knowledge mattered against what happened next. The Mosquito maintained steady course toward its photographic targets. Johnen closed to 3 miles, then 2, watching the British aircraft grow larger in his windscreen. At 1 mile he prepared to open fire. Then George Perry advanced his throttles, and the Mosquito accelerated. Not gradually, with immediate response. The gap began opening. Johnen pushed his own throttle through the gate into emergency power, his airspeed indicator climbing past 400. The Mosquito pulled away regardless. For 8 minutes, Johnen pursued at maximum power, his engine temperature climbing into the red, fuel consumption accelerating toward dangerous levels. The Mosquito maintained what appeared to be comfortable cruise. No sign of strain, just steady flight that left German pursuit behind like it was standing still. At 27,000 feet, the Bf-109G's performance was already degrading. The supercharger working harder to compress thin air. Power output declining. The Mosquito's two-stage Merlin engines, specifically designed for high-altitude operation, maintained their rated power where German single-stage superchargers struggled. Johnen broke off the pursuit at 0903. Fuel state critical. Engine temperature dangerous. He watched the Mosquito disappear toward Berlin. Untouched. Unhurried. As if his entire Staffel's effort meant nothing at all. The combat report he filed that afternoon was devastating in its implications. Interception attempted at 27,000 feet. Enemy aircraft maintained speed exceeding our maximum sustained capability. Unable to close within weapon range despite 8 minutes at emergency power. Aircraft appeared to be wooden construction. Twin-engine configuration. Unarmed. Speed estimated at 420 miles per hour or greater. The report climbed through Luftwaffe bureaucracy toward Berlin. At each level, officers read Johnnen's account with growing disbelief. A wooden bomber outrunning the Bf-109G. Every explanation was proposed except the obvious one, that Britain had built an aircraft fundamentally faster than Germany's best fighter. More encounters followed in rapid succession, each one confirming Johnnen's experience, each one more humiliating than the last. By December 1942, Mosquito operations over Germany had expanded dramatically. Number 105 Squadron flew regular reconnaissance missions. Number 139. Squadron joined them with Mosquitoes modified to carry bombs, flying precision daylight strikes. Every mission followed the same pattern. German radar detected them. Fighters scrambled. Interceptions failed. The Mosquitoes completed their missions and returned to England untouched, their only losses coming from mechanical failures or navigation errors, never from German fighters catching them. The crisis reached Hermann Göring's attention during a December meeting at Karen Hall, where fighter unit commanders presented operational summaries. Oberleutnant Herbert Ihlefeld, commanding Jagdgeschwader Wien, reported the situation bluntly. The British wooden bomber operates with impunity over Germany. Our fighters cannot intercept at the altitudes it operates. When we do achieve contact, it simply flies away. We have attempted 43 interceptions in the past 2 months. 0 successful engagements. Göring's response was predictable fury. The Reichsmarschall had promised Hitler air superiority over Germany, had assured the German people that enemy bombers would never reach the Reich. Now a wooden British aircraft was making those promises look absurd. He demanded immediate solutions. Engineers were ordered to investigate how wooden construction could achieve such performance. Fighter units received directives to develop tactics specifically for Mosquito interception. The technical investigation revealed uncomfortable truths. A team from the Reichsluftfahrt Ministerium led by Diplom Friedrich Seiler analyzed available intelligence on the Mosquito's construction. What they discovered wasn't British technological breakthrough. It was British pragmatism. The wooden construction was a masterpiece of structural efficiency. Laminated wood, bonded correctly, provided strength-to-weight ratios comparable to aluminum while being easier to manufacture. The lack of metal meant no drain on aluminum supplies needed for fighters. More disturbing was the realization about weight savings. Every gun turret on a conventional bomber added weight, required crew positions, created aerodynamic drag. The Mosquito simply eliminated all of it, betting that speed would provide better protection than guns. The weight saved went into fuel and structural strength. Seiler's report concluded that the British had designed an aircraft optimized for a single purpose, going fast and staying alive. They had succeeded. German conventional bomber designs prioritized survivability through defensive armament. The Mosquito's design philosophy made that approach obsolete. German fighter development had followed different assumptions. The Bf-109 was optimized for climb rate, maneuverability, and firepower. Speed was secondary. The Focke-Wulf FW-190 was faster at low altitude, but struggled above 20,000 feet, where its BMW 801 radial engine lost power. Neither aircraft was designed to chase fast bombers at high altitude for extended periods. The Mosquito had found the exact gap in German fighter capabilities and was exploiting it ruthlessly. January 30th, 1943, brought the humiliation to its peak. Hermann Göring was scheduled to address the German people via radio at 11 o'clock in the morning from Berlin, commemorating the 10th anniversary of Hitler's rise to power. The speech would emphasize Luftwaffe strength, German air superiority. At 11:03 a.m., as Göring began speaking, 3 Mosquitoes from No. 105 Squadron appeared over Berlin at 25,000 feet. Their timing was perfect, coordinated to interrupt the broadcast. The Mosquitoes carried no bombs, just cameras and British psychological warfare. They flew in formation over the city center, while German anti-aircraft batteries fired uselessly, shells exploding thousands of feet below. Fighter controllers scrambled 16 fighters. The Mosquitoes completed their photographic run, turned west, and accelerated toward home. Not a single German fighter got within firing range. The entire interception attempt was visible from the ground, Berliners watching their vaunted Luftwaffe fail in broad daylight. The radio broadcast continued, but Göring's voice betrayed rage barely controlled. He stumbled over words, lost his place in the speech. Everyone listening knew what had just happened. British bombers had flown over Berlin while the Reichsmarshal spoke, and German fighters couldn't touch them. The propaganda damage was catastrophic. Göring's fury demanded action. On February 4, 1943, he ordered the formation of 2 specialized fighter units dedicated exclusively to Mosquito interception. Jagdgeschwader 25 would be commanded by Oberleutnant Herbert Ihlefeld, an experienced ace with 132 victories. Jagdgeschwader 50 would be led by Oberleutnant Hermann Graf, holder of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords, credited with 212 victories. Both units would receive the latest equipment and complete freedom to develop tactics. The task was simple and impossible. Stop the Mosquitoes. Ihlefeld established JG-25's headquarters at Verneuchen Airfield near Berlin. His unit received Bf 109 G6 variants equipped with MW-50 methanol water injection systems that could boost engine power to 1,800 horsepower for brief periods. The modification provided perhaps an additional 20 miles per hour at altitude. The training program emphasized tactics conventional fighter pilots never practiced: positioning ahead of predicted Mosquito routes, climbing to altitude long before the enemy arrived, conserving fuel for the critical interception phase. JG-25's first operational mission occurred on February 19, 1943. Radar detected a single Mosquito approaching Berlin at 08:47 hours. Ihlefeld scrambled 8 fighters, positioning them at 28,000 feet along the predicted route. The Mosquito appeared exactly where intelligence suggested. Ihlefeld led the attack personally, diving from above with 3 aircraft, accelerating to over 450 miles per hour. At the bottom of his dive, he closed to within 800 meters. Then his dive flattened into level pursuit. His speed advantage evaporated. The Mosquito simply pulled away. Ihlefeld's combat report documented the failure with precision. Enemy aircraft maintained approximately 410 miles per hour in level flight at 26,000 feet. Our approach from above achieved temporary speed advantage through diving attack, but this advantage dissipated within 60 seconds. Maximum sustained speed of Bf 109 G6 at this altitude is approximately 390 miles per hour. Enemy aircraft therefore possesses 20 mile per hour speed advantage that makes sustained pursuit impossible. Firing opportunity existed for approximately 4 seconds at maximum range. Accuracy at 800 meters against target moving at high speed is effectively 0. Over the following months, JG-25 attempted interception after interception. They refined tactics, improved positioning, gained experience. Nothing changed the fundamental equation. The Mosquito was faster and speed was absolute protection. By November 1943, JG-25 had claimed exactly 2 Mosquito victories, both against aircraft suffering mechanical problems that forced them to slow. The unit had lost 9 fighters, not to Mosquitoes but to RAF escort fighters. The specialized anti-Mosquito unit was bleeding itself trying to catch an opponent it couldn't reach. In November 1943, JG-25 was disbanded. The failure forced German engineers to confront uncomfortable questions. Detlef Ingens Kurt Tank, chief designer at Focke-Wulf, understood the problem with brutal clarity. In March 1943, he wrote that German fighters were optimized for combat against bomber formations. They had prioritized armament, armor, and maneuverability. The Mosquito proved that an aircraft optimized purely for speed created a capability they couldn't counter with current designs. Developing a fighter that could intercept the Mosquito required fundamental redesign. This would take years they didn't possess. Tank's own attempt at a solution was the TA-152H, a high-altitude fighter developed from the FW-190D. The aircraft featured lengthened wingspan, pressurized cockpit, the Junkers Jumo 213E engine with MW-50 injection, producing 2,500 horsepower. On paper, the TA-152H could reach 472 miles per hour at 41,000 feet. Performance that should have dominated Mosquito operations, but development consumed time Germany couldn't spare. The first TA-152s reached operational units in January 1945, 2 years after Göring had ordered immediate solutions. Production totaled approximately 150 aircraft. The few that flew operationally encountered Mosquitoes twice, achieved 0 victories. Messerschmitt pursued the Me-262 jet fighter, promising speeds that would make the Mosquito's performance irrelevant. At 540 miles per hour, the jet could catch anything. But technical challenges delayed operational deployment until 1944. Even then, the Me-262's impact remained minimal. Terrible fuel consumption limited operational time to under an hour. Its engines required overhaul every 25 hours. Most critically, it was vulnerable during takeoff and landing. The few Me-262 pilots who engaged Mosquitoes discovered that speed alone wasn't sufficient. Lieutenant Fritz Müller of Jagdgeschwader 7 attempted an interception over Bremen on February 14, 1945. He spotted the Mosquito at 28,000 feet, his jet accelerating through 500 miles per hour. The Mosquito's crew saw him coming and turned. Not dramatically, just a steady rate turn the jet couldn't match. At 500 miles per hour, the Me-262's turning was gentle or impossible. Müller overshot, lost sight of his target, returned to base having fired no shots. Hermann Göring's rage at the Mosquito became legendary. On March 18, 1943, during a speech to German aviation industry leaders at Carron Hall, a stenographer recorded his exact words. "It makes me furious when I see the Mosquito. I turn green and yellow with envy. The British, who can afford aluminum better than we can, knocked together a beautiful wooden aircraft that every piano factory over there is building. And they give it a speed which they have now increased yet again. What do you make of that? There is nothing the British do not have. They have the geniuses, and we have the nincompoops." The statement circulated through German aviation circles despite efforts to suppress it. Pilots and engineers recognized what Göring had admitted, that British pragmatism had defeated German technological pride. The Mosquito wasn't superior because of advanced technology or secret weapons. It was superior because de Havilland had identified exact mission requirements and built an aircraft that met them perfectly, sacrificing everything that didn't contribute to going fast and surviving. The wooden construction that German intelligence had dismissed as economic weakness proved to be structural genius. Laminated wood provided excellent strength-to-weight ratios, absorbed battle damage better than aluminum, simplified field repairs. Several Mosquitoes returned to England with damage that would have downed metal aircraft. One from No. 105 Squadron landed with over 200 flak holes. The wooden structure shredded but intact. The crew walked away. More importantly, wooden construction meant production could be dispersed to facilities that didn't compete with fighter manufacturing. Furniture factories, boat builders, Piano manufacturers across Britain assembled Mosquitos. De Havilland built nearly 8,000 Mosquitos during the war, production that never strained aluminum supplies and never reduced Spitfire or Lancaster manufacturing. Germany, perpetually short of aluminum, could never have sustained equivalent production using metal construction. By mid-1944, the Mosquito had evolved beyond the aircraft that first appeared over Berlin. The Bf bomber variant carried a 4,000-pound bomb. The FB-6 fighter bomber added 4 20mm cannons and rockets. Night fighter variants used airborne radar to hunt German bombers. Each variant maintained the core advantage, speed that made it untouchable when properly flown. The most devastating role emerged when Mosquitoes began leading RAF bomber command raids, marking targets with colored flares. German night fighters scrambling to intercept found themselves chasing Mosquitoes instead, positioning poorly for the Lancasters and Halifaxes that followed. Generalleutnant Adolf Galland, General der Jagdflieger with 104 victories, wrote in a May 1944 assessment to Göring that the Mosquito represented British design philosophy at its most effective. They identified a mission and built an aircraft optimized exclusively for that mission. German aircraft attempted to serve multiple roles, carrying heavy armament and armor. The result was that they had no aircraft that could perform the Mosquito's mission. More critically, they had no aircraft that could stop the Mosquito. This represented a fundamental failure in their design approach that couldn't be corrected with existing resources or timelines. Galland's assessment was professionally clinical, but it represented admission of defeat. The Luftwaffe, which had terrified Europe in 1940, which had pioneered modern air warfare, which had destroyed the Polish, French, and initially Soviet air forces, couldn't counter a wooden British bomber. The humiliation was tactical, technological, and psychological. Every German civilian watching Mosquitoes streak across the sky untouched understood that Luftwaffe claims of air superiority were propaganda. The Mosquito's success forced German military leadership to confront uncomfortable truths. Every aircraft represents compromises between speed, range, armament, armor, and maneuverability. German bombers prioritized survivability through defensive armament, accepting weight penalties that reduced performance. German fighters prioritized firepower and armor. British designers building the Mosquito had made different choices. Maximum speed, minimal everything else. The combat results proved them correct. More fundamentally, the Mosquito demonstrated industrial efficiency Germany couldn't match. Building from wood meant no competition with fighter production for aluminum. Using non-specialized labor meant production never drained skilled workers. Designing for simplicity meant repairs required less training. Every aspect reflected British understanding that winning a long war required sustainable production as much as tactical effectiveness. Germany, building complex aircraft requiring skilled labor and scarce materials, couldn't sustain production when Allied bombing disrupted supply chains. The strategic impact extended beyond direct military effect. Every fighter scrambled to chase Mosquitoes was unavailable to intercept heavy bombers. Every radar station tracking the fast raiders wasn't focused on main formations. Every anti-aircraft battery firing uselessly at Mosquitoes wasted ammunition Germany increasingly couldn't spare. The wooden bomber created chaos in German air defense that helped every Allied operation. Technical analysis of captured Mosquitoes. When Germany finally acquired intact examples in 1944, revealed no secret technology. The aircraft was exactly what intelligence had reported. Laminated wood construction. Conventional Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. Straightforward systems. The genius was in optimization, in sacrificing everything unnecessary to achieve a single goal. German engineers studying captured examples understood this intellectually, but couldn't replicate it. Because their requirements, their doctrine, their entire approach prioritized different values. By late 1944, Mosquito operations had expanded to roles German pilots hadn't imagined. FB-6 fighter bombers struck communication centers and railway junctions with precision impossible for heavy bombers, approaching at treetop level, impossible for radar to detect until too late. Anti-aircraft guns couldn't track targets moving at 360 miles per hour. Fighters scrambled too late. The night fighter variants hunted German bombers attempting to raid British cities, the Mosquito's speed advantage working equally well in defense. Wilhelm Johnen, the pilot who first chased George Perry's Mosquito over Berlin in September 1942, survived the war and wrote his memoirs in 1956. Regarding that first encounter, he wrote that he knew that morning they were facing something they couldn't counter. The speed wasn't just superior, it was absolute. They could match it briefly in dives, but the moment they leveled off, the Mosquitoes pulled away. It was like chasing a ghost. You saw it. You pursued it. You lost it. Every time, the frustration was complete. The final statistics told the story of complete German failure. Of approximately 7,800 Mosquitoes built during the war, combat losses totaled roughly 1,200 aircraft. Of those, fewer than 100 were confirmed destroyed by German fighters. The vast majority of losses came from anti-aircraft fire, mechanical failures, and operational accidents. German fighters scrambled thousands of times to intercept Mosquitoes, achieved a success rate below 1.5%. The specialized units formed specifically to counter the threat disbanded, after claiming victories that could be counted, on two hands while losing dozens of their own fighters. Mosquito proved that sometimes the most effective weapon isn't the one with the biggest guns or thickest armor. Sometimes it's the one your enemy simply cannot catch. De Havilland's Wooden Wonder didn't defeat the Luftwaffe through superior firepower or advanced technology. It defeated them through pure speed, through British pragmatism that identified what actually mattered in combat and built an aircraft optimized for exactly that mission. German engineering pride, Nazi technological confidence, and Luftwaffe tactical doctrine all shattered against the simple reality that an aircraft traveling 420 miles per hour cannot be intercepted by fighters limited to 390. The wooden bomber that German intelligence had dismissed as evidence of British weakness became the symbol of British ingenuity. The aircraft that flew over Berlin while Göring spoke, that led bomber streams with impunity, that turned German fighter pilots into frustrated spectators watching their enemy disappear into the distance. The Mosquito didn't just survive the war. It dominated its role so completely that German fighters stopped trying to catch it, accepting that pursuit was futile. The joke pilots made, "You see it, you chase it, you lose it," wasn't humor. It was admission of complete defeat. In the end, the hardest lesson was the simplest one. Germany's best pilots, finest fighters, and most advanced technology couldn't catch a wooden British bomber. Not because they lacked courage or skill, but because Britain had built something fundamentally better for its intended mission. The Mosquito proved that sometimes in war, as in physics, speed is the only defense you need. And once you're fast enough, nothing else matters.